The Gwinnett County, Georgia, police have announced a significant development in a long unsolved cold case, bringing closure to a grieving family after nearly 4 years of uncertainty. On the afternoon of July 20th, 2019, Michelle Smalls arrived at her brother, 61-year-old Ray Neal's home, at 475 Lexington Drive in Lawrenceville, Georgia, after repeated calls went unanswered. A sense of unease quickly overcame her when she entered the house, only to be greeted by an unsettling and grisly scene. Blood smeared across the floor, splattered on the walls, and even staining the shower curtain in the bathroom. In a state of shock and confusion, Michelle followed the trail of blood, and it led her to the lifeless body of her brother. The horrifying discovery plunged Michelle into an immediate and gut-wrenching realization. Ray's death was no accident. Michelle's instincts and her understanding of her brother led her to believe that his killer was someone he knew. "I know it was someone he knew because he did not let anyone in his house," she remarked, her voice filled with both sorrow and suspicion. Her words echoed the painful truth. The person responsible for Ray's death had not been a stranger, but someone who had earned his trust. Initially, authorities were uncertain about the nature of Ray's death. Sergeant Micah Hegwood, a cold case investigator with the Gwinnett County Police Department, explained that while Ray's death was initially suspected to be a homicide, the medical examiner's first review suggested otherwise. "We did believe it was a slaying based on what they saw on Ray Neal's neck. Initially, it was thought to have been natural when the medical examiners took a first look," Hegwood recounted. But as the investigation unfolded, a crucial revelation would change everything. An employee from Bird and Flanagan Funeral Home, when preparing Ray's body for burial, noticed something unsettling. Upon closer inspection, it became apparent that the cause of Ray's death was not natural, as initially thought. The body was released to the funeral home, but the funeral home took a closer look at the wounds and ended up calling back, saying, "This looks like something else," Hegwood recalled. This crucial moment prompted a second, more thorough autopsy, which confirmed that Ray Neal had been murdered. The details surrounding his death were now clearer, but the pain for his family was far from over. In 2019, Eddie Reeves, the then chief medical examiner investigator, pointed to Ray's existing medical issues, such as possible clotting problems, which may have exacerbated the extent of his injuries. "He could have clotting issues and therefore would bleed a little bit freer than normal," Reeves explained. This medical insight offered some context, but it did little to ease the anguish felt by those who loved Ray. For years, the case remained unsolved, leaving the Neal family in a perpetual state of uncertainty. The unanswered questions weighed heavily on them, each passing day a painful reminder of the mystery that surrounded Ray's death. Ashley Haynes, Ray's niece, candidly shared the emotional toll the unresolved case had taken on their family. "It has just been hard trying to figure out what happened and who did it," she said. Her words conveyed the intense frustration and grief of living with the shadow of a cold case, with no answers, no resolution. The family found themselves in a constant state of questioning, struggling to trust anyone, wondering why no one had come forward with information. You do not know who to trust. You do not know who knows what. Why did nobody come forward? Why did nobody say anything? Ashley lamented, her voice filled with a deep sense of betrayal and loss. As time dragged on and hope dwindled, a surprising turning point came in the form of community involvement. Local residents, who had been aware of unusual activities around Ray's neighborhood, began to speak up. The neighbors, once silent, reached out to the family with information and theories of their own, piecing together details they had observed in the days leading up to Ray's death. "People kind of put it together in the neighborhood and started giving us calls and giving their ideas of what they thought happened," Ashley explained. This influx of tips, alongside the family's unwavering determination, ultimately led investigators to suspect 50-year-old Carmen Marie Hunt, a woman with a troubling criminal history. Sergeant Hegwood confirmed that these new leads, combined with careful analysis of old evidence, pointed toward Hunt as the prime suspect. "They said they thought Carmen Hunt may have done it," he explained. At the time of the investigation, Carmen Hunt was already serving a sentence for a separate stabbing incident in 2022. This fact allowed authorities to link her to Ray's case through forensic evidence, including the troubling similarities between the two crimes. Both attacks involved the use of a large kitchen knife, a detail that caught the attention of investigators. The same weapon was used, Hegwood remarked, noting the striking similarities between the two cases. Moreover, a bloody fingerprint found at the scene of Ray's murder was matched to Hunt's in both incidents, further solidifying the connection between Hunt and Ray's death. Hunt's violent history and her disturbing patterns of behavior seemed to mirror the tragedy that had befallen Ray. Despite the mounting evidence and the eventual arrest of Hunt, Ashley and her family found no solace in the resolution. While the arrest brought a sense of accountability, it could not undo the trauma, nor could it fill the void left by Ray's untimely death. "I do not know if we are ever going to be relieved because we lost someone senselessly," Ashley confessed, her words heavy with sorrow. However, she also acknowledged that the identification and charging of Ray's killer provided a sense of closure, albeit a bittersweet one. "I think it is a sense of peace, yes," she said quietly, as though grasping for some semblance of comfort amidst the turmoil. Hunt remains in custody at the Gwinnett County Jail, facing charges of felony murder and aggravated assault, and also for the 2022 stabbing incident. Despite this, authorities have yet to release any details about the motive behind the crime, or how Hunt and Ray might have known each other. The question of why Ray was targeted lingers, unanswered. Ashley has her own theories, suggesting that the crime could have been drug-related. "I think it was substance-related, and that is how she knew of him," she said, though she expressed doubt that she would ever truly find the answers she sought. "I do not think I will ever be at peace because I want to know why. And I do not ever think I will get that part of closure," Ashley confided. The case of Ray Neal's murder highlights not only the complexities of cold cases, but also the emotional toll that such tragedies take on those left behind. For the Neal family, the journey toward justice has been long and fraught with uncertainty, but it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of never giving up in the face of overwhelming adversity. Though the killer has been caught and brought to trial, the family's grief endures. The pain of losing a loved one in such a senseless manner will never be fully alleviated, but the pursuit of justice offers a flicker of light in an otherwise dark and difficult time. Ray Neal's story is far from over. The impact of his death resonates not only with his family, but also with the wider community, who, though they did not know him intimately, felt the ripple effects of the tragedy. His life, taken too soon, serves as a poignant reminder that justice can be elusive, but the fight for truth and accountability is always worth pursuing. For Ashley, Michelle, and the rest of Ray's family, the murder investigation and Hunt's subsequent arrest offer a glimpse of justice, but it is a justice tempered by the knowledge that no amount of legal resolution can fully heal the wounds left by Ray's loss. The investigation into Jason Reutder's death quickly turned cold after the initial flurry of activity in 2005. Despite the best efforts of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, the case seemed to stall at every turn. The mystery surrounding Jason's murder left his family in a constant state of uncertainty, but their resolve to uncover the truth never wavered. Below is a breakdown of key events over the years as the case, initially forgotten by many, gradually came back into focus. On August 6, 2005, Jason Reutder's life was tragically taken from him. His body was discovered in his Salt Lake City area home, with clear signs of multiple stab wounds. The lack of forced entry, coupled with the cryptic argument overheard by a neighbor, left investigators with very few leads. Jason Mitchell Reutder was far more than a name in a cold case file. He was a devoted father of two, celebrated for his creative spirit and a razor-sharp, often horribly funny sense of humor. His talent for doodling, whether on old newspapers or the walls of the garage, never failed to spark laughter, especially from his sisters, Nikki Price and Stephanie Pershon. Despite finding a bloodied knife with Jason's DNA at the scene, authorities couldn't identify a suspect. The DNA found at the scene, which included both Jason's and an unidentified individual's, was entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System. But it yielded no matches. Jason's family and friends were devastated. His loved ones even bought space on billboards along the highway, pleading for tips. A $5,000 reward was offered by the Unified Police Department. But the case, despite these efforts, grew cold. For months, the investigation seemed to be on track but quickly faded as new leads failed to emerge. For several years, the case seemed to fall into the abyss of unsolved crimes. Investigators re-examined the evidence from time to time, but as the years passed, leads continued to evaporate. There was no sign of a motive, and although police received occasional tips, they went nowhere. For Jason's family, these were years of frustration and heartache. They remained in constant contact with the authorities, holding on to the hope that one day, someone would provide them with the closure they so desperately needed. By 2011, it was evident that Jason's case had gone cold. However, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office had not forgotten about him. New investigators were assigned to the case, and cold case protocols began to kick in. Yet, with the passage of time, the lack of new evidence or reliable leads stymied their progress. The case was essentially at a standstill. It wasn't until 2014 that the Sheriff's Office began to review its entire cold case strategy. The hope was that newer investigative techniques, such as DNA testing, might help uncover fresh clues. However, this period of renewed interest did not yield immediate results. Jason's family, still steadfast in their search for justice, leaned on each other during these years of waiting, refusing to let the case fade into oblivion. Jason's sisters continued their efforts, remaining in regular contact with law enforcement. "I know this could have stalled, but they would not stop until it was done," said Nikki Price. Their persistence mattered. In 2015, after nearly a decade of no progress, the case was handed over to the Salt Lake County Cold Case Unit. The detectives who inherited the case were driven by the hope that the latest forensic technologies could uncover crucial information. Jason's family, who had been vocal in their calls for justice, saw the transfer of the case to the Cold Case Unit as a sign of renewed commitment. However, even with the fresh perspective and resources of the Cold Case Unit, investigators found themselves back at square one. The lack of new evidence made it difficult to move forward, and the case continued to hang in limbo. For Jason's family, it was a period of both hope and despair, as they began to wonder if their beloved relative's murder would ever be solved. Over the years, the Reutder family kept fighting for answers, despite the case remaining inactive. They continued to advocate for their loved one, attending public meetings and trying to engage local media to keep their father's memory alive. The family's outreach efforts were tireless, hoping that a new approach or development would finally unearth the truth. Despite little public progress behind the scenes, law enforcement continued to re-examine every aspect of the case. Detectives sought out new ways of utilizing forensic tools, even revisiting DNA samples collected in the early stages of the investigation. However, advancements in technology still weren't enough to bring them closer to a suspect. Jason's family often revisited their personal memories of the man they loved, holding on to the belief that one day, someone would come forward with the truth. By 2020, investigators had begun to explore the application of advanced DNA technology, such as familial DNA searches. New forensic techniques, including genetic genealogy, allowed law enforcement to identify potential familial links to suspects through databases. Although still in its infancy, this technology represented a game-changer for cold cases. It provided a glimmer of hope for cases like Jason's, where traditional investigative methods had failed. However, despite the promise of new technology, Jason's case did not see a breakthrough this year. The hope that these new methods would provide a viable lead continued to push the investigation forward, but the Reutder family still struggled with their grief. They continued to hold their vigil for justice, never allowing the case to slip from public awareness. In late 2021, the Utah law enforcement community launched the innovative Cold Case Playing Cards initiative. The cards, which featured victims' faces and case details, were distributed in jails and prisons across the state, with the goal of generating new leads, or encouraging individuals with information to come forward. Jason's case was one of many included in the program. For his family, this was a new source of hope, even if it didn't immediately yield any new tips. In 2022, in a creative and desperate attempt to bring attention to Utah's cold cases, the Unified Police Department launched a campaign using a deck of playing cards. Each card featured a photo and details of a missing person or homicide victim. Jason Reutder's case was among them. The deck was distributed in jails and prisons, the idea being that inmates might recognize a name or a face and come forward with information. The initiative wasn't guaranteed to work, but for Jason's sisters, it was another chance. "It might shake up some dirt," said Stephanie Pershin, "and that's exactly what we need." Despite the passage of years, the Playing Cards campaign represented a turning point. It kept Jason's case in the public eye and renewed interest in solving the crime. For the Reutder family, it symbolized their continued fight for justice and their refusal to let Jason be forgotten. It wasn't until 2024 that a breakthrough in the case finally arrived. The Utah Bureau of Forensic Services flagged DNA from a separate case, linked to Mark Nelson Munoz, who had been arrested in another state. Munoz's DNA matched the evidence found at Jason Reutder's crime scene. This match led detectives back to Munoz, who had evaded justice for nearly 2 decades. The DNA breakthrough proved that advancements in forensic science, especially DNA matching, could breathe new life into cold cases. It allowed investigators to close in on a suspect after years of frustration. However, even with the discovery of Munoz's identity, the task of locating him proved to be difficult. He was known to be unhoused and had a transient lifestyle, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to track him down. On January 23, 2025, after years of pursuit, Mark Nelson Munoz was apprehended in connection with the 2005 murder of Jason Reutder. His arrest marked a long-awaited and emotional moment for Jason's family. After nearly 2 decades of uncertainty and pain, they finally saw a glimmer of hope that justice was within reach. Munoz was charged with first-degree felony murder, though details surrounding his motive remain unclear. The Reutder family felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Jason's son, Andrew, who was only a child when his father was killed, expressed that it felt as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I just feel so much better," he said, reflecting on the years of anger and grief that had consumed him. His aunts echoed that sentiment. Stephanie Pershin said, "I just want to say how much of a relief this is. It has been a long 20 years. Detective Ben Pendern, who worked the cold case, and Salt Lake County Sheriff Rosie Rivera both addressed the public. Rivera stated, "This arrest is a testament to the dedication and commitment of our detectives, who never gave up on finding justice for Jason Reutder." District Attorney Sim Gill emphasized that the legal process was only beginning, but expressed hope that the charges would help the family begin to heal. As of 2025, the investigation into Jason's murder remains active. Detectives continue to seek any further evidence that may shed light on the motive behind the killing. While Mark Munoz has been arrested, he has not been cooperative with authorities, making it difficult for investigators to understand the reasons behind Jason's death. The case, which had remained dormant for nearly 20 years, is once again a focal point of law enforcement's attention. While justice may have taken decades to arrive, the Reutder family has expressed deep gratitude that their beloved Jason's case has finally seen progress. "It has been a long 20 years, said Jason's sister, Stephanie, reflecting on the emotional toll the case has taken on their family. Though the family's grief is far from over, the arrest of Mark Munoz brings them one step closer to understanding why Jason's life was taken so senselessly. After nearly 4 decades, the loved ones of a slain Colorado man finally received the justice they had long been seeking. On November 21, 1985, 51-year-old Roger Dean became the victim of a tragedy so horrific it could have been lifted from the pages of a crime novel. A man, concealed by a ski mask, forcibly entered Roger's home in Lone Tree, Littleton, Colorado, where he brutally compelled Roger to tie up his wife, Doris Jean DJ Dean, and silence her with duct tape. The assailant demanded $30,000 from their savings account, but when Roger attempted to flee, the intruder mercilessly ended his life. Left behind at the scene were a backpack and an orange ski mask, which Roger had managed to tear from the perpetrator's head. According to witnesses, the assailant fled the scene and ran down the street, eventually getting into a car that sped off. Early on, there were puzzling aspects to the case that perplexed investigators. Roger bore twine marks on only one wrist, indicating he had likely not been tied up as the gunman had purportedly forced him to do. Furthermore, though Roger had been wearing contact lenses at the time of his death, his glasses were discovered in an upstairs bedroom, strangely covered with duct tape. Sergeant Anthony Spurlock of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department believed these discrepancies were deliberate red herrings designed to create the illusion that Roger had been bound and blindfolded. He theorized, "We believe Roger may have hired an individual to stage his kidnapping, withdraw the money, and then report the robbery as a means of keeping the $30,000 for himself." As the investigation progressed, police unearthed an unsettling revelation. Roger had secretly withdrawn nearly $30,000 from his business and stashed it in an undisclosed account. DJ, however, stood firmly by her husband, insisting he could never have orchestrated such a plot. "In my heart, I cannot believe Roger had anything to do with this," she said. "This is the man I was married to for 26 years. Yes, we had problems in the past year, especially after the loss of our son, but I knew him too well to believe he was capable of this." DNA samples from the ski mask were collected, but at the time, the limitations of forensic science left the case cold. It wasn't until 5 years later, July 21, 1990, that DJ and their daughter, Tamara, received an anonymous letter from a person claiming to be Roger's killer. The letter demanded $150,000, insisting it was owed to him, and threatened further violence if his demands were not met. The letter ominously read, "Do you know that I have met your daughter Tammy on a few occasions? Do not make me end her. Your son is deceased. Your husband is deceased. Do not risk your daughter. She is the last one left." The authorities were convinced the letter was genuine and linked it to Roger's killer. The writer claimed he would call again in 6 days. On July 27th, DJ and Tamara were placed under round-the-clock protection. FBI agents moved into the house, setting up a wiretap. When the man called, as he had promised, he revealed that Roger owed him money and insisted that DJ pay the sum of $150,000. The FBI traced the call to a payphone in Denver, but by the time they arrived, the caller had vanished. Over the next several months, the extortionist continued to call DJ, demanding the money and offering cryptic instructions on where to deliver it. One day, he told her to drive to a supermarket 20 miles north of her home and wait for further instructions. DJ, aided by the FBI, attempted to entrap the man by concealing agents in her car and surrounding the area with surveillance teams. Finally, the caller told her to leave the money in an alley behind an apartment complex in downtown Denver. On August 19, 1990, DJ made the drop as instructed, but the FBI waited in vain until dawn, and the man never appeared to collect the money. Special Agent Bob Pence of the Denver FBI speculated that the perpetrator, possibly alerted to the law enforcement presence, had either gotten cold feet or been too frightened to make the pickup. In his final phone call, the extortionist made a chilling threat against Tamara. He claimed that he would strike when she least expected it. The authorities knew very little about the suspect, other than that he was white, about 6 feet tall, and spoke with an unusually extensive vocabulary. Strangely, there was a conflicting report from a 9-year-old girl, Carly Gibson, who insisted the man had been black. As time passed, the case slowly went cold, and the statute of limitations had expired without any major breakthroughs. 13 years later, in 2003, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, entered the case into a national database, but no matches surfaced. Another 15 years would pass before further advancements in DNA testing allowed investigators to enter a new analysis. By 2020, an investigator specializing in DNA genealogy had traced the likely parents of the perpetrator, whose family had 2 sons. For DJ, however, the years of waiting became unbearable, and tragically, she took her own life in 2020, 7 months before genetic evidence would finally link the perpetrator to the crime scene. After decades of technological progress in DNA testing, law enforcement connected the suspect to the scene through items left behind, the backpack and the ski mask. The focus shifted to 2 brothers, one of whom, Michael Chanel Jefferson, boarded a flight from Los Angeles to New Orleans. During the flight, Jefferson discarded a plastic water bottle, which was intercepted by detectives. The DNA found on the bottle matched the samples collected from the ski mask at the crime scene. This crucial discovery led investigators to believe that Jefferson was indeed the perpetrator. In addition to the DNA evidence, an investigator who had been on the same flight with Jefferson also recognized similarities between Jefferson's voice and the phone calls made by the extortionist. Michael Jefferson was arrested on March 23, 2021, and extradited from Los Angeles to Colorado. On August 6, 2024, Jefferson, now 67 years old, pleaded guilty in a plea bargain. On January 16, 2025, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison for the murder of Roger, with credit for more than 3 years of time already served. Although it was the maximum sentence, the district attorney in Douglas County believed that Jefferson could be paroled in as little as 8 years. Tamara, Roger's daughter, voiced her frustration with Jefferson's lack of accountability. "I've been sitting behind him for 4 years," she said. "His expression has remained unchanged the entire time. He seems emotionless. He does not take any accountability. It's as though he doesn't care." She added, "He could have done a lot for me and a lot for himself if he had just explained why he did what he did and offered an apology. At the very least, a recognition would have been helpful. I have no respect for him whatsoever." Given the prolonged trial delays and the scandal surrounding DNA mishandling within the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Tamara remarked, "I think it's a good thing Mom wasn't here to witness this. If she wasn't already deceased, this process would have destroyed her." The DNA test that ultimately confirmed Jefferson's involvement was also the reason he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, conspiracy to commit murder, instead of the original, more severe charges. Former forensic scientist Ivan Missy Woods had worked on the case, but after she was found to have manipulated DNA evidence in several other cases, prosecutors decided that the risk of going to trial was too great, even though Jefferson's DNA was later confirmed by an independent lab. Investigators suggested that a potential motive for Jefferson's actions may have been his relationship with a woman who was an employee of Roger's. He may have believed Roger was wealthy and thought he could profit from him. Finally, after years of waiting, the mystery of Roger's death was solved, but the pain of loss and the quest for justice had lingered far too long for those left behind.